internet that has everyone covered. Can your internet do that?
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, presented by Xfinity. Today, we're back at home, coming to you from Xfinity Live across the street from Lincoln Financial Field, where in about an hour the Eagles will host the New Orleans Saints. I'm Eagles beat reporter Josh Tolentino for the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I'm joined for the first time this season, a special guest, my fellow beat reporter Jeff McLane. Jeff, how's it going?
Hey Josh, I don't know about special, but unfortunately E.J. Smith couldn't be here today. He'll be back next week, I'm sure, but it's great to be here with you for the next 30 minutes. Of course, all our viewers at home, and I'm looking forward to covering this game today.
Jeff, as always, really looking forward to your insight, and again, appreciate your time, but I just want to remind everyone back home throughout the season, we'll be coming to you live from every game at home and on the road. The best link you can find us at is inquirer.com/GameDayCentral. It's there you'll be able to find all our coverage from throughout the week. Leading up to game day, you'll be able to see our predictions, and most importantly, you'll be able to submit your questions and comments and also interact with us throughout the game. Today, in a little bit, we're running over to the link. It'll be myself, Jeff McLane, E.J. Smith, and our columnists Dave Murphy, Mike Sealski, and Marcus Hayes. That's where you'll be able to interact with us, again, at inquirer.com/GameDayCentral. Jeff, we got a lot to talk about, man, since the last time that we gathered. Most importantly, I guess really over the weekend and back-to-back days, some news happened with this team. Can you tell me what's the latest?
Yeah, the big news of the week was that Dallas Goedert and Avonte Maddox signed contract extensions. That makes 4 of the 5 draft picks from the 2018 class who have signed extensions this season. Of course, the first was Jordan Mailata right before the start of the season. Then you had Josh Sweat, and now Goedert and Maddox. The Goedert extension isn't much of a surprise if you ask me. Obviously, once they traded Zach Ertz, that was probably likely to happen, and he's shown since that trade that he's played pretty well, and that it's something that was almost a foregone conclusion. The Avonte Maddox extension surprised me a little bit for a nickel cornerback to pay someone that much. That being said, Maddox is playing good football, and Howie Roseman has long wanted to re-sign his own draft picks if they've done enough to warrant that extension, and so far we've seen that with 4 of 5 guys.
Maddox was a little bit surprising, Jeff, also especially considering not necessarily the depth, but the young pieces they have underneath Maddox, and I'm referring to the backup corners. They've really stockpiled up. You thought that maybe one of them would emerge later in the season to fight for that position, that slot cornerback heading into next year. But like what you mentioned, especially I think when you focus in on Avonte Maddox this year, and Jeff, you could provide some insight in previous years with Maddox 3 years leading up to this, most comfortable, all throughout his career playing in high school, playing in college, and that's back in the slot. And, Jeff, if you could explain a little bit about the experience that Maddox had last year as opposed to this year with Jonathan Gannon.
That's correct, Josh. I mean, when they moved him to the outside, he struggled. And some of it had to do with his lack of height. He's got a pretty good vertical, so he can offset some of that. But, it was an issue for him at times and other parts of playing that position. Now, the slot corner position can sometimes be more difficult than the outside corner because you don't have that boundary to protect you. You have to a lot of two-way goes. You have to do a lot of tackling and helping in the run support. But it's a position because you don't play the full number of snaps that typically guys don't get a lot of, the typical big money contract that you see for cornerbacks. That being said, the nickel nowadays, the way we have so many pass-happy offenses, will be out there a large majority of the time. And that, as you mentioned, is pretty much where Avonte Maddox was drafted to play. He did a little safety, actually, in his rookie season and did fairly well there. I think some people thought that eventually he would be the safety who takes over Malcolm Jenkins' spot. But nickel corner is where he's at and it's where he should be. And that will likely be where he'll be for the next several years.
Before we get to Avonte Maddox's roommate, Dallas Goedert, you mentioned Malcolm Jenkins. He's making his return today at Lincoln Financial Field. Obviously, he played 6 seasons here. Jeff, you covered him for the entirety of his tenure in Philadelphia. What are you expecting, his, not necessarily homecoming, but his welcome back to Lincoln Financial Field, and just what do you think of the progression of his career since he's left the Eagles?
Well, it kind of is his homecoming because even though they did play here last year, the stadium was empty. So it wasn't like the fans got to embrace Malcolm, who was pretty much a fan favorite here, not only because of what he did on the field, but everything that he's done off the field in terms of giving back to the community and obviously in terms of social justice. This is where it all started for Malcolm Jenkins, and he earned all 3 of his Pro Bowl nods here. There was a contract dispute with Howie Roseman and the Eagles that eventually led to him being traded, but he's back in New Orleans where he started his career and has pretty much picked up where he left off. He's playing that same safety role that he did here. He's almost like a quasi-linebacker in certain run situations, but that's Malcolm, and while he may have lost a step in these later years of his career, he is about as smart as it gets for a defensive player.
Yeah, and voted, very quickly as a team captain for the Saints, so that speaks to his impact. I brought that up because, we're coming to you from Xfinity Live, and I already see several fans wearing these jerseys, Malcolm Jenkins jerseys, Eagles jerseys, so it should be a nice applause for him when he takes the field in a little bit at the Link. One more guy that we wanted to get back to, Jeff. We started with his name, and I think he's the most important from the 2018 class, in my opinion. Dallas Goedert. He was the highest drafted pick in that second round. In 2018, and his impact has been truly, despite really before the season playing behind Zach Ertz. Jeff, you've covered both of them for a very long time. What was your thoughts on Dallas Goedert really stepping into that prominent tight end one?
Well, it was bound to happen once they drafted Dallas. Once you move up in the second round for a tight end, you're setting in place that this is going to be your guy of the future. Now, you can question that pick when you had Zach Ertz already on the roster, and this was a Pro Bowl tight end who set the franchise, actually the NFL record at the time for catches for a tight end, and Zach has since obviously gone on to Arizona and shown that he can still be the tight end number 1 for any team. That being said, you have Dallas, and Dallas gives you a little bit of a different dynamic than Zach Ertz in that he can catch the ball and run after. Maybe a little bit of a better blocker. That being said, Zach Ertz, nobody runs routes as well as he does. And I think if you look at what they gave Dallas, it's pretty much in line with the tight end contracts, about $14 million a year. Although if you look at the guaranteed years, he's not making a heck of a lot more than he's not making actually as much as someone like Mark Andrews who signed a contract just recently. But you could make an argument of keeping Zach Ertz, signing him to a cheaper contract, and getting something very valuable in return for Dallas Goedert. That being said, I think the Eagles wanted to stick with their draft picks. I think this was something that, as you mentioned, was a foregone conclusion, and it should be interesting to see if Dallas can kind of ascend into that top tier of tight ends, maybe not in the Travis Kelce, George Kittle layer, but also maybe in the Mark Andrews category.
Yeah, as you discussed Dallas Goedert, and really any conversation that we have with Nick Sirianni when it comes to game planning, really setting up his script, just offense in general, there are 2 guys that he wants to get the ball. That's 88 and 6. Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith. Those are the 2 top playmakers on this offense, and they're trusting him to really, again, what you said, Jeff, elevate into one of the best tight ends in the league. We'll see if it happens and develops over these next few years. Jeff, it's time to transition to injuries. Again, a lot has happened since last week. I think we have to start with Miles Sanders. He's back. He's off injured reserve. He had missed the past 3 weeks with injuries. With that low ankle sprain, rather. But he's back, and, we saw him at practice this week during the early portions, and he looked good going through all those individual drills. What are your expectations today for Miles Sanders going up against a very tough Saints running defense?
Yeah, he'll be active, and the question is how much will he be used? And with what we've seen over these last several weeks with Jordan Howard and Boston Scott becoming 1 and 2 or like 1 and 1A running backs, you have to wonder if Sanders is he's not going to get the workload that he did typically. But you have 3 pieces there. They kind of each come with their own certain skill set. But it's a significant question about Sanders and his future, because here's the guy, you drafted him in the second round in 2019, and number 1 workload running back the last 2 years. But this year they didn't use him very much in the first 8 games before he went down. You have to wonder, what did that mean for his future? And it wasn't until after he left that all of a sudden the run game started to get it going, and you had some ballast, and we've seen what's happened since then. The offense has been very, very efficient, and that's what you need to going forward. Jordan Howard is a tough runner. He doesn't waste much time. He gets north-south. He's a little lighter than he has previously, so he looks a little more agile. Boston Scott, same thing. He can get you a little more on the outside, but he's done a very good job. And you look at the numbers from these guys, they're both averaging 5.1 yards. That's excellent. And you have to wonder, Sanders is a little bit different, but there's nobody that can hit a home run like Miles Sanders. That guy can take any carry to the house.
Yeah, over the past 3 weeks, the Eagles leading the NFC in rushing yards, and it's been due mainly to, obviously, Boston Scott and Jordan Howard, but also Jalen Hurts. I mean, Jalen Hurts is an agile quarterback. He's been really learning to mature this season on when to leave the pocket and, when to extend those plays as opposed to staying in the pocket and, using his arm. So a very interesting dynamic, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the run game later in the show. Another guy that we didn't mention, Kenny Gainwell, the rookie, who got some run definitely at the beginning of the season as they've transitioned to Jordan Howard and Boston Scott. His carries have gone down. How that dynamic changes with Miles Sanders back is yet to be determined. But another guy that popped up on the injury report, Jeff, Derek Barnett, popped up with a neck injury. Derek Barnett is such an interesting topic when it comes to the Philadelphia fan base. A very high draft pick, but he's got more penalties, more personal fouls than he does sacks at this point in his career. Jeff, are you that type of if you're Nick Sirianni, if you're Jonathan Glenn, like that aggression, or are you telling are you having these conversations throughout the year, because it seems like almost at every game at this rate that he's committing a costly penalty?
Yeah,